If those are the things that you're focusing on, the Apple Vision Pro probably isn't for you. And frankly, it's probably not for me either. But there are some important reasons you should keep an eye on a device like the Apple Vision Pro if you're a designer, technologist, or someone who works in the XR space. So let's talk about that. If we take a moment to strip away the hysteria and things catching the headlines, what are we left with? The Apple Vision Pro is a head-mounted display intended for viewing spatial content. Apple doesn't want you to call it a pass-through mixed reality VR headset, but that's pretty much what it is, with a major emphasis on the mixed reality part. Unsurprisingly, this has caused many people to compare it to the Meta Quest 3, which is, you guessed it, pass-through mixed reality VR headset. But if I had to compare them, that's not really what I would be focused on. I mean, if you really get into it, the Meta Quest 3 is primarily built to be a VR gaming headset that can also do mixed reality if you wanted to. But that's not the important part here. The important thing I think you should focus on is that it is the best all-around headset for VR gaming right now. Feel free to argue about that in the comments, but I think it's true. The Apple Vision Pro, on the other hand, even if the form factor is basically a VR headset, the purpose of it is not really for VR, at least for now. You may have noticed that the majority of Apple's advertising on the Vision Pro right now has been focused almost exclusively on 2D flat panel apps, and there's a few good reasons for that. First, practically speaking, it allows Apple to launch the Vision Pro with a ton of options to start filling up the App Store. It's relatively easy to convert an iPhone or iPad app that you already have published in the App Store to a 2D flat panel app for Vision Pro. Relatively speaking, of course. So everyone is jumping on the hype train and creating their 2D flat panel apps for the Apple Vision Pro. The second reason that 2D flat panel apps are the focus right now is because these apps will serve as a transitional experience for people who are generally unfamiliar with XR or spatial computing. If you're already a VR user, this may seem totally irrelevant. I mean, don't millions of people already have a VR headset of some sort? Don't people just already know about this? Well, speaking as someone who works in the XR industry, you'd be surprised. Remember, something like the Quest is primarily a gaming-focused headset. This means that people who aren't big gamers or otherwise don't want to move around for entertainment purposes, they're probably not going to be interested in a device like the Quest, at least while we're ignoring the price. So who else is out there? Well, there's people who love movies. You know, the people who are the first one to grab a ticket for an immersive IMAX experience. There's also the sports fanatics who watch every game, dive deep into the stats, maybe even gamble a little bit in fantasy sports, and just want to analyze like every facet of the game. And of course, we have the tech workers who already have a MacBook Pro and want to be more productive in their workspace. These people, they don't really need a full deep dive immersive VR experience to get these sort of things out of a device like the Apple Vision Pro. 2D flat panels on devices have been around for decades, and frankly speaking, ever since writing or even drawing was invented in human history. The world around us might be 3D, but the way we traditionally share visual information has almost always been in some sort of 2D format. It's just something we know and understand. So without getting too far ahead of myself, I think there are perfectly valid reasons to have 2D UI in spatial computing. Not everything has to be a 3D native interaction. I don't think it'll completely go away. So, okay, we have some decent reasons to use 2D UI in a spatial environment, but why would anybody care? Why would anybody even need this device when they already have a TV or a phone? Well, it's not really about the 2D UI itself, it's about how it's being used and what it represents. Remember how I said this is a transitional interface? The Apple Vision Pro as a device is actually coming to us at a really interesting time in the tech world. People are frustrated with their addiction to screens, even to the point where we're starting to see additional devices pop up to help us avoid using screens, using voice-based AI interfaces. So while some of these new ventures are taking the approach of extra gadgets you have to bring around with you in addition to a phone, XR devices are generally trying to consolidate all of your gadgets into one. Vision OS still allows you to have multiple panels displayed around you, but this marks the start of a new era where we're slowly bringing content outside of these frames and into our real spaces. So that starts with pulling the content from your TV, phone, tablet, or computer into your living room on that flat UI panel. But over time, as people get used to designing for the spatial medium, things will become less and less 2D. But even while we're stuck with mostly panels, there's just something so freeing about looking at content in your space versus like being hunched over a little rectangle in your hand to the point that you don't even notice what's happening around you. So as much as features like eyesight can seem like a silly gimmick at first glance, no pun intended, when you think about it in this context, it really shows an effort to direct your attention to where it should matter most, which is not the screens or the content itself. It's how this technology is supposed to enhance your life, not overwhelm it. So whether or not people see a device like the Apple Vision Pro as being, utilized to its full potential at initial launch with fully immersive spatial content, I mean, no one really knows what the full potential of this device is anyway. The Apple Vision Pro doesn't really need to conform to what other VR headsets are currently doing. After all, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, that's just foolish, right? What they're starting to figure out is how people want to interact with technology in the future. And Apple's not just half-heartedly betting on that being spatial. They want to make sure that the spatial experience is so good that you won't want to go back to your dumb little pocket rectangles and other devices. So as someone who works in the XR space, I'm definitely going to be trying out the Apple Vision Pro through some friends who brought their own devices, maybe even trying some of the in-store experiences. But because of the work that I currently do, I just don't think it's worth it for me to purchase the first generation of the device, at least not for my own personal use, that is. And of course, we can't completely ignore the fact that the price isn't exactly friendly to most people in this current economy, because even if you have a good paying tech job, with constant layoffs and a tough job market still on the horizon for the foreseeable future, price is just not really worth the risk for most people. But despite all of this, we can still look forward to the future and discuss what innovation in spatial computing will be able to offer us when it's a little bit more accessible, which I think is worth talking about. So what do you think? Is the Apple Vision Pro really going to shift the XR industry into the mainstream, or is it going to flop just as quickly as its hype reaches peak? Did you order the Apple Vision Pro yourself? Let me know down in the comments. And if you want to see more videos for XR designers, be sure to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.